Kim, what attracted you to the project?
Danger, risky business. Phil, Richard, cast, you know. Need I say more? I think Phil actually pulled me into the project. I met him, I fell in love with him, and in 10 minutes, I just knew I could trust this man. You know, I could just put myself in his care and dive in and go to work doing this, because this is it's risky business, it really is. So you need a partner with you. I wanted someone who would share the responsibility of my performance. Not, I mean, it's up to you, but I really wanted some direction, a partnership there, and I knew I had it in 10 minutes, which is so rare. Such meetings like that just really don't happen that often. I wish they did, they just don't.
What about you, Phil?
What pulled me into the project? Well, first, you know, there was the script for me. I thought it was an unusual thing in Hollywood. It was a good story. And so many films today don't have a good story. And then on top of that, there were some great characters and some great sequences and scenes and moments. And I just thought it was something I could sink my teeth into. And it was very, very different from anything I'd done before, which is always a challenge. It was a big studio movie, as opposed to my other films, which were more outside the system. And so for me, you know, having a chance to work with Kim and Richard and Uma and Eric, and you know, with the crew that was assembled behind the film, which were some of the Dean Tavoularis and Jordan Cronenweth and George Fenton, Tom Noble, some fantastic talent behind the camera. It was just a chance to hopefully tell a great story with great people and work with the best. And I really feel like we did have a chance to work with the best.
And I had worked with Richard before. That was an advantage. And two, this film read the first time I read it, and then after talking to Phil and knowing that we were so in sync, and of course Richard and I having, you know, we did No Mercy together, this project just looked like it could be very much a people film. And I love that kind of film. So a people film, meaning, you know, a real commercial film, an enjoyable experience. You know, where you go to the movies and you actually pay the money and you actually leave and say, we got our money's worth. So that's, you know, I hope we did that. I think we did. Well, Richard was a villain. Numa's a villain, so we don't know.
From Heather's perspective, she's not the villain. Heather's perspective, it's their fault.
It's all their fault.
Exactly.
And it's your fault for telling them anything. The emotional gambit from A to Z, I mean, you couldn't ask for a better part to do. I mean, I couldn't. I really couldn't. And she was such a fun character because your emotions were right there on the surface every day that you came to work, you know. So it was just like, okay, A, you're up. You know, number 17, you're up. You know, emotions. You just could choose anything you wanted to. And I loved it because I just didn't have any responsibilities for my actions as this character. And that's just fun. That's like a child, you know. They do what they do and say, well, you haven't taught me no yet, so what? You know, and I like that. No, I find that question very difficult because I was just Heather, you know. When I had to go home, my husband is Eric Roberts, so he's a totally different person. I had a totally different agenda as Heather, playing with my husband, you know. Eric's beyond, he's fabulous in this film, and he's scary, so I've often said, I'm so glad I didn't have many lines with Eric, because everything with Eric is shown up, I think, physically so much on my face, my hands, my reactions, the tremble in the voice, everything that's our relationship. With Richard and his character, I was in control more at times, you know, so, and then the key would turn on me. You know, I found Heather, who she found herself falling in love with Richard's character, and that was it. That was the scariest thing because she never had felt anything like that in her life, and I think that's where a lot of her anger came from. So I loved being tossed back and forth. I loved it, you know.
But there, you know, it wasn't probably as intentional from the outset as it was in the result. I didn't really go back and study the Hitchcock films and go back and look at Vertigo, which is the most often mentioned reference. but I think that they're just probably in my head. You know, I mean, I'm about as big a fan of his work as one could be. I've only read the Hitchcock-Truffaut book about 10 times, and you know, to me, he is one of the greatest filmmakers to ever work in the medium. So he defined the genre. I mean, let's face it, he defined the thriller and the suspense, psychological suspense thriller. This movie, this kind of movie. So it's very difficult not to make one of these movies without referencing to the master of the medium. And I think that that's part of the fun of the movie. I mean, the Hitchcock thriller to me is some of the funnest, most entertaining movie making
Film
ever made.
Ever.
His
It
films,
is.
they are just fun, and that's what we wanted this movie to be, was fun. And if people think of it as a Hitchcock movie, to me that's fantastic, because that you can't get, there's
Better
no
than
greater
that.
entertainment. I mean, look how often you'll be sitting at home and at 11 o'clock you'll change, and there's you know, Rear Window, and you think, oh, I'll watch a few minutes of this. You end up watching the whole movie, you know, or North by Northwest,
Totally.
or Vertigo, or Psycho. That's the fabric that this movie is cut from, and
It's like a roller coaster ride. I mean,
Yeah.
it really is, you know.
and hopefully it really surprises you. And you know, for me, how often do I get to go to the movies and actually be surprised? Or I think, oh, I know what's going to happen here. I've got it figured out, and actually have it twist on me. And that was part of the thrill of making the movie, and hopefully part of the thrill of watching the movie. And so that's all. Yeah, I mean, that's all a part of the Hitchcockian tradition, I suppose.